Okay, you guys, welcome back to the Black Mind Garden, where we are remapping minds so you can create a life you design. So today I'm super excited about my guest. She is a sister friend of mine and the wife of another very good friend of mine as well. We are family, basically.
Yeah.
And this is Charlice Hurst. And, today we're going to be talking about highly sensitive people. And it's interesting because when uh, how this topic came up was just in like normal conversation. We were just talking about momhood and the way we react to the world and the way our kids react to the world and I brought up this whole idea of sensory processing, the way our brain processes, and it's led into this whole conversation. And I was like, maybe I'm highly sensitive. And
Mhm.
so Charlotte sent me this evaluation, this assessment, and I took it and I scored really high. And I was like, that explains some things.
Mhm.
So I really thought that it would be very prudent, because this is more common than we think, for us to talk about this, to give space to those people out there who may be having this experience. So welcome, 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 Charlotte, to the show. So glad to have you. How are you?
Good. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to have this.
Me too.
Yeah.
So, I like the audience to get a little acquainted with you. So, to talk a little bit about what you do, who you are, your accomplishments.
Okay. Well, officially a professor of management at the University of Notre Dame, and I'm a researcher, and a big part of my research is personality. So, I know like the research side of what they call sensory processing sensitivity.
Mhm.
Out in the world, we're calling it highly sensitive people who are high in that trait. And then personally, I am an HSP, a highly sensitive person, and actually learned that way before I became you know, personality researcher. So it's been it's been a big part of my life. Like it's informed a lot of my life. I think that's it. That's really all I have to say about myself right now.
Well, one of the things that I am always fascinated is when you share your title, okay, you have to say it. You are it's organizational. What is it? Tell me again.
Um, Organizational behavior, organizational psychology, we call them both. Yeah.
Yeah, so I like that. I mean, I'm always fascinated with that title, organizational psychology. And I think it's important for people to know that you have that psychology background,
Mhm,
right?
mhm,
We both do, because
mhm,
it, you are not only a researcher, you're degreed in it, you work in it,
mhm.
and you have the personal experience of it.
Yeah.
So like it's just, all of the various ways that the perspectives that you have of it are very
Mhm.
valuable, you
Yeah.
know?
Thank you. Yeah, that does definitely, I'm thinking a lot these days about how sensitivity affects people's work and their experiences at work. So it's something I want to look more into to just understand what HSPs are dealing with and their work
Yeah.
life. Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about what highly sensitive means. Like, what is that actually mean for the
Okay.
people out there who don't know?
Okay. So it's scientifically a trait called sensory processing sensitivity.
Mhm.
And it's normally distributed in the population, which means that, they think like maybe anywhere from 15 to 30% of people are high in sensory processing sensitivity. So we call those people HSPs, highly sensitive people. And it, sensitivity has a lot of different meanings, in out in the world. Somebody I was reading the other day was saying, it's one of those few words that's all got very positive, but also very negative connotations, as in like, you're too
Mhm.
sensitive, we've
Right.
all heard that. But so it refers really to kind of nervous system
Mhm.
sensitivity. And so people who have this like highly sensitive nervous system, they are very attuned to their environment. They're attuned to
Mhm.
other people. A lot of people who are HSPs, call themselves empaths,
Mhm.
because they're very attuned. And because we take in so much, we process things more deeply. There was an interesting study that was published, and it was an MRI study, neuroimaging, and they looked at how HSPs make decisions, and they looked at whether we make decisions more like people in Asian cultures, specifically Japanese people, because
Interesting.
in their culture, they tend to look more at context when they're
Mhm.
making decisions or just making observations. They look at
Mhm.
everything that's around whatever it is they're trying to evaluate.
Yeah.
Whereas in our culture, people tend to zoom in on just like kind of a narrow aspect. That's why a lot of times we tend to attribute things. If we see somebody acting out or something, we attribute it more to the person rather than
Mhm.
the environment in our culture. But it turns out
Mm.
HSPs process things and make, observations and decisions more like, Japanese, like cultural norms, that
Mhm.
we take more context into account. So, this is wonderful because it can lead to better decisions, but it can also lead to, just feeling overwhelmed a lot if you're not careful because you're taking in so much more information from the environment. So, there are gifts. I think a lot of HSPs don't see the gifts in being an HSP because we live in a
Mhm.
world where a lot is coming at us and we're expected to do, and go all the time. So, most of the HSPs I've talked to just have found it really challenging, almost to the point of feeling like it's a curse or a disability.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's such an interesting thing. Like, so first of all, the way you talked about HSPs, um, highly sensitive people processing or making decisions based on context or like big picture ish
Yeah.
is so relatable because now in NLP and neuro linguistic programming, and it's so funny. I just taught this class like the other week. We
Mhm.
talk about high chunk people
Mhm.
and low chunk people, right? The big picture people or the details people.
Mhm.
And people who have like this high sensitivity processing, they tend to be people who are high chunk people,
Mhm.
right? It's like more big picture. So then all of the information, the detailed information that's coming at us
Mhm.
is like way too much,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, and so it's interesting because I love the way you said um, sensitivity has all these different connotations, some
Mhm.
positive, some negative. And I
Yeah.
remember growing up, my mom calling me sensitive and um, it being said like it was a negative thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And then later, when I learned to take care of myself, and we'll talk about that too, like when I learned to take care of myself because of the way, and I didn't even have language for it. I really didn't have language for it until like maybe a couple of years ago, or maybe last year.
Mhm.
And then you really honed it in our conversation, like, oh, it's a
Mhm.
highly sensitive person. Because I kind of had an idea of the sensory processing sensitivity, but I didn't have this very specific language.
Mhm.
Um, that but I did learn. I knew that I was sensitive to the environment, and I learned how to create boundaries and um, take care of myself in a certain way. And it
Mhm.
occurred for other people, particularly my family, that I was aloof, that I was
Yeah.
not unemotional,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
there were certain ways that I learned to shut things down.
Yeah.
And so it's so interesting how being sensitive
Mhm.
is automatically for the most part is like a bad thing,
Yeah.
and really it can be a gift, like you said,
Mhm.
and it also can be looked at a different way. Like if someone is sensitive, instead of thinking that it's like emotionally labile
Mhm.
or not in control of their reactions,
Mhm.
it's more like, oh, the way you're processing things is different. And if you look at
Mhm.
that, then there's something to be like, okay, not like what's wrong with you, but how is your processing different? And how
Mhm.
do I need to interact with you in
Yeah.
order for for it to work?
Exactly. Yeah. So you need to be around people who respect that, which can be hard to find because it's hard to find people who, um, well, it's just so culturally different. It's so
Mhm.
different from the way we operate. Um, oh, you said something just a minute ago that I wanted to go back to. it escaped me, so we can move on, and maybe it'll
It'll
come.
come back.
Yeah,
It'll come
yeah.
back. That's what happens. That's what happens in these
Mhm.
conversations. We go deep.
Yeah.
Um, you know, one of the things that I noticed, and I would love for your feedback on this. I always noticed that I was very sensitive to smell.
Mhm.
I was very sensitive to light, and I was very sensitive to sound. To this day, still am. Right.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
is my son, actually.
Mhm. Mhm.
Right. And so, like, how that relationship, like how that can be a tip off
Yeah.
to someone being highly sensitive.
Yes, definitely. So yeah, I have that same experience. I'm really sensitive to light and sound. My office is always really dark. At
Mhm.
work, people would always come in and be like, "You want to turn on the light?" And I'm like, "Mm-mm, no," and especially not the fluorescent lights. Mm-mm. It's almost
Mhm.
painful, you know.
Mhm.
So yeah, a lot of us have that, and that's actually part of the scale is sensitivity to like those sorts of things. And yeah, I think a lot of people kind of wonder if they tip over into sensory processing disorders,
Mhm.
and sometimes I wonder, like, is this like to the point where you consider it a disorder?
Mhm.
But yeah, it's a big part of our experience, and it makes certain things more difficult. Like shopping has always been really difficult for me. The
Yes.
fluorescent lights, the sound,
Mhm.
and then there's just so much stuff to look at and decide
Mhm.
about. So, but yeah, and the sound thing has in particular been the bane of my existence because I mean, there's sound everywhere. And especially having kids, they can be really loud. And other people just don't experience the noise the way that I do. Like even just faint noises can just turn me
Yes.
a little crazy. So it's actually been a relationship issue. It's affected my
Mhm.
relationships with a lot of people because there's just kind of this conflict about what noise level is okay.
Yep.
So, I invested in some high-end noise canceling headphones last year. I actually walk around my house with those on plus earplugs in.
Yeah. Oh, listen. I just bought these a new pack
Yeah,
just this
I
weekend.
keep those. Yes.
Hmm.
Lifesaver.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because like when I get in the car with my mom, she loves to blast the radio. Or if I
Okay.
walk into her house, she
Uh-huh.
has the TV super loud, and I always come in. I'm like, "Can you turn that down?" And she's always
Mhm.
like,
Mhm.
like,
Mhm. Yeah. Yes.
or, your
Yes.
ears are so sensitive, and I'm like, "Yes, they are." And I
Yeah.
can't go to and like I have to if I'm gonna go to the mall. I really hate going to the mall. First of all, like the
Mhm.
advent of online shopping and Amazon is like heaven because I
Yes.
don't have to go to the mall. And then when
Right.
when the pandemic started and I started Instacarting, now make no mistake, the pandemic was horrible, but Instacart, I was like, you mean I never have to go to the grocery store again?
Yes.
What?
That online grocery shopping is, I wish I was organized enough to know in advance everything I need. But yeah, it is
you
nice.
know? And so, when I would go to the mall with my mom, I remember as a kid, like all of that sound and all of the people and all of and it's not sort of, some of it's the intensity of the sound, but some of it is the frequencies, the various frequencies and the
Yeah.
muffling, the rumble.
Yeah.
It's just like really
Yeah.
bothersome. And I
Yep.
can only stay in it for maybe about an hour, if that.
Yeah.
So I go to the mall, I will go. If I have to go to the mall, then I'll go like on a Wednesday
Yep.
at like 10 o'clock in the morning
Yes.
when
Yes. Yeah.
nobody's
Yeah.
there.
I always leave there exhausted. It's exhausting. So, but you know what? I remember what I was going to comment on before.
Mhm.
You talked about emotional lability and how people might see us as emotionally labile, and that's true. We may have more of a tendency to be that way, but probably only if we're in adverse circumstances where we're overwhelmed a lot, so we don't so our ability to self-regulate is low. And also when we grew up in adverse circumstances, we're more likely than other people to be emotionally labile. Um, but if you grew up under, good circumstances as an HSP, you tend not to be any more emotionally, kind of unstable than anyone else. But that's the thing though. The thing is we are much more susceptible to, adverse environments.
You said something that was really interesting is that um, we have less capacity or, um, yeah, less capacity to self-regulate.
Hmm.
That's something that's really interesting, um, because some people may feel like, oh, it's like anger management, like I have no control over my emotions.
Hmm.
And in super overwhelming situations, when like in a regular situation, you may be able to self-soothe or self-regulate.
Hmm.
Um, and what we mean by that, I think people who are like saying like, what does that mean? It just means like calming yourself down or
Yeah.
bringing yourself back to focus or bringing yourself back to center, like doing it without anybody having to do it for you, right?
Right.
And so people with highly sensitive people
Hmm.
may have a lesser capacity to do that. And I find for myself that
Hmm.
that can be true.
Hmm.
So I'm gonna tell on myself a little bit. I love y'all. You know how much I adore my 6.5-year-old,
Hmm.
and he has this wine, and right, you know, it's like nails on a
Ooh,
chalkboard, right?
yes.
And there's a specific way that he can cry that is I can be very intolerant about.
Mhm.
Now, before I'm gonna tell you, before we had this conversation some
Mhm.
weeks ago,
Mhm.
I was thinking something is wrong with me. Parents out there listening, moms out there listening, get at me with this one. Something's wrong with me because I cannot stand to hear my son wail and whine like that. Like it
Mhm.
literally does something to my brain. It drives me nuts, right? I have to leave the room. I
Yeah.
have to go into another room, close the door, and I feel bad because I know he's trying to communicate something to me,
Yeah.
but I literally cannot
Yeah.
stand it.
Yeah.
And after we had that conversation, I was like, you know what? It's not the whining itself, it's the frequency of the noise.
Mhm.
And so one day he starts the whining, and I had one pair of earplugs left.
Mhm.
And so I said, hold on, Delson. I can't, because I said, I can't. I said, you know what? Mommy's brain cannot stand this noise. So I'm going to go get my earplugs. So I
Mhm.
went and I put the earplugs in, and he was still whining, but then
Mhm.
I could listen to him, you
Mhm.
know, because somehow this little thing,
Mhm.
it blocked whatever frequency it was that was
Yeah.
driving me bananas.
Yeah.
So now I keep a pair in the car, a
Mhm.
pair in my purse, a
Mhm.
pair in my room,
Yeah.
right? In every room in the house,
Yeah.
just in case,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
he's 6. Of
Yeah.
course, he's going to whine from time
Yeah.
to time, right?
Yeah.
But I, as a parent, want to be able to hear him and not be
Mhm.
like, ah,
Yeah. 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 That's one of the challenges. And I just have to plug these this product here,
Hmm.
earplugs, they're reusable, and they have a wire that's attached to the earplugs. I just wear these around my house, around my neck. So
Hmm.
anytime I need to block out noise, I can put them in. But yeah, I completely identify with that. You know, my son went through that whiny stage when he was 6. We have a 6-year-old now who's going through their stage and making all kinds of noises. Um, so yeah, I definitely identify with that. And there's research on HSPs who are parents that's found that, you know, we can be kind of not very supportive parents when we're overwhelmed.
Hmm.
And, often the source of the overwhelm is the kids themselves, so we can be really sensitive. And I find it's not just the noise, but it's when my kids are upset, it's just very upsetting to me, and
Hmm.
very distressing
Hmm.
to me. And I'm feeling for them. So
Yeah.
it's harder for me to be there for them.
Right.
But yeah, I like also that you said that you kind of explain to your son, why you need the earplugs and what's going on
Hmm.
without making him feel blamed for your discomfort.
Right. And so I think this is like part of, the learning is in communicating with our kids, and also learning ourselves is when we understand ourselves, we can explain to our kids, well, look, mommy's putting these earplugs on, or, when I get upset about this, it's more about my brain is
Mhm.
processing or can't process it.
Mhm.
The other thing is, for me, is if when my son, which he does, right? He just does it. And I'm learning to like sort of explain to him what works and what doesn't. He
Mhm.
just runs up on me and like just, runs into me and is hanging on me. And I'm like,
Yeah, yeah.
and I love affection. So I love the hug and the kiss. But there's a way about that overstimulates my nervous system.
Mhm,
And so, I have to be like, stop.
mhm.
Okay. Now,
Yeah,
yeah, let's get a hug and a kiss. Let's get a hug
yeah.
and a kiss.
Yeah,
Not
yeah.
that you can't just be running up on me and like, "Blah." But he's,
Mhm.
and he's a boy, so it's kind of like, well, it's par for the course.
Yeah.
But I'm really trying to get him intuitive to, all right, this is how I process.
Mhm.
These things don't work. You run
Mhm.
the risk of getting yelled at if you do these things.
Yeah,
And mommy's trying to
yeah,
work on it, right? Like
yeah,
mommy's really working on it.
yeah.
And so, I say these things, I think, as a parent, and even in relationships, like in romantic relationships,
Mhm.
people who there's only so much listening to someone talk that I can do continuously before I have to be like, all right, I need a break.
Yes. Oh, I have that same thing. And I have a very talkative husband, as you know. That's a regular theme for us. I'm like, okay, babe, I need a break. I need to
Right? I'm
go
full.
take a breath. So yeah, especially when
Yeah.
the conversations are intense and he's like, why are you tapping out? I'm like, I'm not tapping out. I just need to like bring my, nervous system
Yeah.
back to a place where I can be
Mhm.
present in the conversation.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think that as highly sensitive people, the most important thing we can do is understand our triggers
Hmm.
and then communicate them to the people in our lives,
Yeah.
right? And that's a self-care action. Like
Hmm.
really saying, I pre-frame some people and say, look, I am a person that I love to be with people, but
Hmm.
there's a point at which I get full. And
Hmm.
when that happens, I can't listen anymore.
Hmm.
So there may come a point in our conversation, if we've been in a long conversation, that I might say, okay, I'm full.
Hmm.
And that means I need some quiet. And I may get up and I may go away, but I'll be back. Right.
Yeah.
And I have to pre-frame the people in my life about that so they don't think I'm just being rude, or
Mhm.
I don't want to hear what they have to say, or
Yeah.
I don't like them. There's all kind of stuff that people make up in their minds
Yeah. Yeah.
when they have a reaction.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a good that discussion about being around people and needing a break. I think the question always comes up is HSP is it just introversion? And
Hmm.
because a lot of people identify as introverts and that's much more well known.
Hmm.
But the research shows that, they're not the same thing. You can be an introvert and not very highly sensitive, and there are extroverts who are highly sensitive. So, they're
Hmm.
not the same thing, but introverts do. I'm sure a lot of introverts listening to this will be like, well, I have that experience or whatever. You should go ahead and take the HSP test too, though.
Right, right.
It might be
Yeah.
both. And it really helps to add to your understanding of yourself to know that, because then you'll start noticing other ways that sensitivity affects you that you may not have realized, were related.
Yeah. And I love you bring that up, that, that introversion, although it may overlap, is not the same thing as HSP, as the highly sensitive person, and that extroverts can also be highly sensitive. I think
Mhm,
that's really key for people to understand.
mhm,
And, you know, we really have to build our self-care regimens. I'm big, big, big on self-care, and you are too,
yeah.
around what works for us in our environment, because at the end of the day, that kind of self-care helps you be the best person for yourself and for your job and for your kids and for your spouse and your partner. you know it helps you to be the best person. And so another pre-frame that I do for like the people in my life is that I
Mhm,
say, I do the things the way I do them so that I can be good not only for myself, but so that I can be likable and
mhm.
tolerable around
Yes.
people that I care about,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
Because if I'm not, then, you
Mhm.
know, what good
Yeah.
am I,
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
world,
Yeah.
I
That's
have
a
a
good
question.
thing. Okay.
It's sort of a sidebar question about whether this is related. Highly sensitive people and food. I don't know if this is a function of just my metabolism or a function of being highly sensitive. I find that like I can't, like when I get super hungry, prolonged hunger, and it doesn't take very long, you have to
Mhm,
eat regularly, or
mhm,
else it affects like the way I process things. And I don't know if that's a
mhm,
blood sugar thing or if it could be related to highly sensitive, or I wonder if there's a physiological
mhm,
component to highly sensitive people.
mhm. Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, that's that nervous system thing. I think we're what's the word for it's interoception when you're how attuned you are to how your body feels.
Ah,
And so we're just, I think a lot of us are just really aware of the signals that our body is sending us and will notice pain or discomfort. And I'm like that too, you know. I'm a regular eater, but
hmm.
also if I eat something that is not great for me, you know, I look around, I'm like, how do all these people like how they eat, you know, they eat bacon and eggs and toast for breakfast and they go get a burger for lunch. I mean, don't you feel horrible? You know, because I really notice, and even like in the morning, people are like, "Oh, you do yoga every day. You look, you know, that's so wonderful, great." And I'm like, you know what? It's not really an accomplishment; it's a necessity because I feel the tightness in my
Hmm.
body, and if I walk out
Hmm.
of the house feeling like that, just nothing feels right. I
Hmm.
got to get rid of that tightness. I don't know how people get up and just get dressed and go. I don't. If I don't prepare my body for the day, it's lost. Yeah, so we definitely feel those signals more.
Yeah. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Yeah, I'm a yogi too, and it's like I say, yoga keeps me sane,
Mhm. Yeah.
body and mind.
Yep.
If I go 3 or 4 weeks without yoga, I'm getting all kind of craziness going on in my shoulders, and
Yeah.
things popping out of place, and the knee and
Yep.
the hip, and I'm 46 now, and I'm not
Exactly.
just not that agile anymore
Exactly.
as I
Exactly.
used to be, right?
Right.
But
But probably a lot more than a lot of people who are younger than you. And that's one of I
yeah.
think that's one of the benefits of being an HSP if you honor that need to take care of yourself is that you get to our age and older and you're younger than a lot of
Hmm.
people because you've taken care of your body because your body forced you to take care of it. You know, I've been
Hmm.
running for well over 20 years now, like a regular runner. I can't miss it,
Hmm.
you know, and I'm just really thankful because I see people around me developing kind of chronic issues
Right.
that you don't get as much when you're a runner, when you regular exercise. So
Yeah.
it's awesome to have the habits in place already.
I know. Well, let's talk about that. I mean, let's talk about how do we set ourselves up for success? Now, understanding, like if you're listening and you're thinking, oh my gosh, I relate to this, maybe I'm highly sensitive. We're gonna have a resource in the show notes where a link where you can actually go take an assessment.
Mhm.
And if you determine that you are, and also you can take this assessment for your kids. So like for myself, some of this stuff can be genetic or passed down or familial.
Mhm.
You can take it for your kids, and my son, he's highly sensitive, and I kind of knew because it came from him first, and then I was like, oh, some of the things about highly sensitive, highly sensory processing I have. So that's
Mhm.
how I became aware of it in myself.
Mhm.
So you can test your kids too. And oh, one thing I wanted to say is this is like a big spectrum. So when we talk about introversion and highly sensitive, I wonder, it seems like it's like a big old spectrum that
Mhm.
everybody falls on at
Mhm.
some point.
Yep.
And wherever you are on the spectrum, it's just where you are on the spectrum, right? Like there's
Yep.
no right, no wrong, no bad, no good. It's just where you
Right.
fall. And it's
Mhm.
important for you to know where you fall on that spectrum so you can set up self-care routines.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
with that, how would you say, like, what are some of the like quintessentials around self-care for highly sensitive people?
I wouldn't be surprised if all of us need our sleep, like really, really need our sleep. 7 to 8 hours a night, maybe more. Yes. You know, I know if I don't get that sleep, I am just worthless the next day. And I've always been jealous of people who didn't need as much sleep as me or who could operate tired. So
Hmm.
I think sleep, you know, we talked about the regular meals, you know,
Hmm.
doing something for your body to kind of to relax it, to relax your
Hmm.
body, you know, relax your nervous system, whatever activities will take you out of, keep you out of fight or flight mode and keep you in that, you know, parasympathetic state where, you know,
Hmm.
that's the state where you can learn and be creative and all that. That's where you really can mine the benefits of being HSP. But I just, recently have been thinking about uh, a self-care lifestyle, self-care as a lifestyle rather than
Mhm.
something you do when you're not working or taking care of kids or whatever. But because I've always felt like I have to do so much self-care. If I spent as much time doing self-care as I really feel like I need to, I would spend all my time doing self-care. Like, you know, I just always, it's not because I want to be a lady of leisure. It's just because, I need it. But thinking about, okay, how do you make every moment in your day, everything you do, uh, a self-caring sort of thing. So,
Mhm.
and also as busy people, you don't necessarily have time to go get the massage,
Mhm.
and all the things they recommend doing. So how do you just like make every day? And I think if you look at like the mindful living stuff, there's a place to start.
Yeah. One of the things I do that is absolutely necessary
Yeah.
is I have to have a specific amount of quiet time per day,
Yeah.
whether it's in the morning, whether it's in the evening. It
Yeah.
usually amounts to, if I think about it, like if I really think about it, it usually amounts to about 3 to 4 hours.
Hmm.
Not in one sitting, because there's just not, unless I'm on vacation or my
Yeah.
son's with his father, I'm not getting 4 hours of contiguous quiet time.
Right.
But it may be like, in the morning, an hour of yoga.
Yeah.
It may be if I'm in the car and I'm going to get him,
Hmm.
having the radio be off and just
Yep.
driving in silence.
Hmm.
It may be like after I put him to bed, and I intentionally put him to bed early. Like I've trained him from the youngest. He
Yep.
goes to bed at like 7:30 now. He doesn't go to sleep until 8, but he's in his room and I'm getting my quiet time. I
Hmm.
take longer showers. I take baths, like a couple times a week. I just got a remodel of my house because I didn't have a bathtub in
Mhm.
my owner suite.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, that's not gonna do, because
Essentially,
mama
yeah.
needs a bath. you know.
Yeah.
And so I build in quiet time moments
Mhm.
throughout the day so
Mhm.
that I can recharge myself, renew myself.
Yeah.
Quiet is like, for me, quiet is like one of the most important things to keep
Mhm.
me like good.
Yes. Yes. Cutting down on that sensory input. Um,
Mhm.
One thing I like to do is take walks during the day, just
Mhm. Mhm.
periodically take walks, just be out in nature. Nature is so healing for us
Mhm.
in particular. But a lot of people are afraid to, do these things because they take time and you're not doing, and therefore you're not producing.
Mhm.
And a lot of these practices, though, if you look at the research, they make you more productive. They make you more
Yes.
creative. Not sleeping is just the worst way to take care of your brain and be productive,
Mhm.
especially in the long run. So, and one thing about HSPs that the researchers found is that we tend to be more likely to have low self-esteem,
Mhm.
which makes
Mhm.
it even harder to make the decision to engage in self-care
Mhm.
and have boundaries. And
Right.
we often have a low self-esteem because we have this trait that is devalued by the culture. We have these characteristics that are devalued. And so we grew up thinking something was wrong with us. And a
Mhm.
lot of us end up having to, work on repairing that.
Mhm.
So I think that's fundamental when someone figures out that they're an HSP, if they identify with that idea of like um, of devaluing the trait. The first place to start is to really look at how you feel about yourself. And I wouldn't
Mhm.
say necessarily build up your self-esteem because that's really hard to do, but to build self-compassion.
Yes. Yes. And, to look at, well, what are the things that contributed to that, and what do you need to do to really start clearing that stuff out of the closet,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because you're just so right. Like if you've been devalued or been made to feel that something's wrong with you all of this time,
Hmm.
like we have,
Yeah.
I myself included, the first place to start is to like really evaluate that. Okay, how do I feel now that like the first thing I can say is, guess what? Nothing's wrong with you.
Yes.
Like this is good news. It's just
Yeah.
the way your brain works.
Right.
And I just really want to get people out of this whole something's wrong with me. It's like the way your brain works. It
Yeah.
works a little differently from other
Yeah.
people's,
Yeah.
right? Nothing's wrong with that.
Right.
Um, And then like looking at, okay, now all of these conversations that you've had about yourself for all these years, time to wash them out. So what do you need to do that? You know, whether it be start with a therapist, whether it be get some mind remapping, whether it be, you know, whatever it is, you need to deal with that. And I really love what you said, like about the boundaries, because that is the thing that, well, I'll say as an empath, you know, and if you identify with being an empath, I recommend you take this test. That we can have some trouble with is setting boundaries. So if you recognize any of these traits, take the test, start with the deep work, start, like, I love you said, self-care lifestyle, right? Self-care lifestyle. Look at, okay, how do you wash out the old negative self-talk and beliefs and old negative emotions attached to who you thought you were? And now that you have a blank slate, how do you now then create a world or an environment that works specifically for you? And I say infuse laughter into your day. I mean, like, that's another thing, like laughter.
I forget to do that all the time. I'm so super serious. So I have to remind myself to laugh. So that's super important. It's so good for your health.
That's fun.
To cry. You know, because crying puts you in a parasympathetic state. You know, I mean, it can get excessive, you know, but sometimes I frequently just I feel tension. I just gotta let tears flow. And after that, I can go on with my day. I'm fine. So the laughing and the crying, the full range of emotion. And nobody, not Maisha, did not pay me to say this. But her mind remapping has been the most powerful thing for me to let go of counterproductive emotions and thinking. And I mean, I've done therapy for years, all kinds of different therapy and stuff. And I you know, therapy is important. Like, I wouldn't recommend, yes, I highly recommend a good therapist. But the mind remapping, it gets at the unconscious level, you know, and it just really gets to the root. And I don't know how you did it, but I have just, in just a couple of months, just felt so transformed and so much better able to put up boundaries. Like, that's been the main thing. And to get really clear about decisions, because I'm less uncertain of myself, you know, I'm looking at the right information and kind of filtering out all the other stuff. So it's been powerful. And I mean, I think HSPs would benefit from it regardless of how they're coping now. If you're doing good, you'll just do even better. So
I appreciate that. That's so sweet. And you know, that makes my heart sing, right? That just makes my heart be like, oh, it's exploding inside in a good way.
Good. That's your HSP coming out.
Right. Yes, we're super lovey. All the feels. Yeah. So I mean, it's important to deal with that stuff, because again, it's been piled on, like, oh, you're sensitive, or oh, you're this, or oh, you're that, or oh, you're, and the truth is you just process a particular kind of way. That's it. That's all. So, well, cool. Well, man, this is just, I think this is like the first of many conversations, just like a sneak preview. We're going to have another conversation in the future. So stay tuned. And look, just a little accountability. You know, I'm trying to train you in this work, because the HSPs need this work. And, you know, I can do it, but I want some partners. And I consider you, you know, as an expert in behavior, like one of my partners. And I just appreciate you, and I appreciate that how we relate to each other. And I've gotten just as many breakthroughs just in our conversations as you have during our processes. So I just want you to know that.
Thank you. Well, you know, when I grow up, I want to be just like you. So
girl.
It's flattering to hear that I've influenced you positively as well. And on that, also, HSPs, the world needs HSPs to be able to do this kind of work. I think that is, you know, it remained in the gene pool for a reason, this trait, because we needed it. We're the advisors, we're the healers, wisdom. So, you know, the world needs us to fill those roles.
Yeah, that's so key. Like, HSPs tend to be like the healers or
Mhm.
the advisors, a
Mhm.
lot of coaches, a
Mhm.
lot of, I imagine, creatives like
Yes,
musicians and,
yes.
like composers
Yeah.
are HSPs as well. So it's just really interesting you said that, because it's like, I wonder if we were to look up really what the HSPs are driven towards in terms of career, what
Yeah.
we see. But
Yeah.
certainly you're right. I mean, there has to be a balance.
Mhm.
And the reason that there's such a diversified way of processing is because the way people process informs how they're going to contribute to the world.
Mhm.
And so make no mistake, if you're a highly sensitive person, that's why we have to get rid of those ugly conversations that you might have acquired along the way. You
Right.
have a big contribution to make to the world. You
Mhm.
just want to honor that and figure out
Mhm.
what that is if you haven't already. Now, if you have and you're in that position, then you got to own it. You
Mhm.
own your HSP. And I
Yeah.
think that's the power in it. You own it. That's why we're talking about it. You
Yeah.
own it. You put up the self-care structures and
Mhm.
strategies that are going to take care of you, and
Mhm.
then you set your boundaries, and
Mhm.
you pre-frame people in your life, you let them know, and then
Mhm.
you own your shit.
Yeah.
That's
Exactly.
what you do,
Stand in your
right?
truth. You
And
stand in
stand
your
in
truth.
your truth. That's
Yeah.
right. You stand in your power. So yeah. So thank you so much for coming to have this conversation. I geek out on this. This is brain
Me
stuff. Is like,
too.
this is right up my alley. And I hope that, as the listeners, and I'm sure that they can relate to this, so that maybe someone that is highly sensitive, that you've looked at a particular way, you can be like, oh,
Yeah.
share this podcast with them, right?
Mhm.
And because this will definitely transform the way they see themselves and their ability to now go up in the world a different kind of way. So thank you so much, Charlize, for being with me today. I
Thank
so
you for
appreciate it.
having me. You're welcome.
Yes. And please let the listeners know your website, where they can find you.
Well, only website I have is not super related to this somewhat. It's called autism. It's called autismamateur.net. And it's because I have an autistic child. So right now I'm blogging over there. Getting ready to put up a site though for HSPs. So stay tuned. That's going to be coming at you. And
Yeah. Well, I would say, here's what I'd say about that. I wouldn't say it's completely unrelated.
no, actually, it's not at all. It's not at all related. And I'm planning to do a post in a little, and there's a lot of research about the overlap between HSPs and autism.
Hmm.
Um, and now people are starting to look at how parents of autistic kids actually have a lot of those traits. And I suspect that a lot of those parents who have a lot of those traits but don't clinically qualify for an autism diagnosis. And I
Hmm.
suspect that a lot of the people, there's a lot of overlap between people high in those traits and highly sensitive.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
What's interesting about that is that my brother was autistic,
Hmm. Yeah,
and
that is interesting.
I never connected the dots
Yeah.
until today.
Yep. Siblings of people who are autistic also are higher in those traits. So there might be some link there that where some people tip over into like a clinical category,
Hmm.
but other people have a lot of those characteristics. I certainly identify with a lot of what I hear autistic adults say they go through.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So your autism amateur site actually
Mhm.
is somewhat related, and will as you move to put up your site for HSP, perhaps there will be some type of link, I imagine.
There will be for sure.
Yeah. Cool beans, cool beans. Well, you guys, thank you for listening. Yeah, without the audience, there is no podcast. And so, if you like what you hear, we encourage you to share with others, because, the whole point of this is to really empower others and to get this message out to the world and to transform lives. So share this podcast with your friends, write a little review and let us know what you think, so that other people who come behind you know that this podcast can make a difference in their lives. So,
Mhm.
with that, I say, you all out there, stay safe. Thank you so much again, Charlize, for being with us. We so appreciate you. I can't wait till the next time.
Me too.
Yes. And we will see you on the next episode. Namaste, y'all.
All right.